Chapter 10. Enter not into the path of the wicked. Kitty hung on the gate and watched them pass by. The long train of high wagons with grated windows, out of which strange animals peered with their great fierce eyes. The two elephants in their scarlet and gold blankets, the tiny ponies tossing their shaggy manes, the splendid carriage drawn by 8 gaily blanketed, gaily plumed, dancing horses, and every seat filled with splendidly dressed men and women. The bright red bandwagon with the sun glittering over the wonderful brass instruments and turning them into gold. Kitty watched all this, watched and listened to the loud, full bursts of music, until her heart swelled and bounded. She sprang from the gate and stamped her foot on the ground. I wish I could go," she almost screamed at last. I want to! I never wanted to go anywhere so bad in my life." "I reckon you'll take it out in wanting," said her mother, who had also leaned on the fence and watched the show go by. "Folks who have to dig as I do from morning to night just to get something to eat don't have any money to spend on circuses." Kitty shook her head with rage. "I don't go anywhere!" she screamed. "Never! I never went to a circus in my life, and all the boys and girls around here go every year. Tip always goes, always. He manages to slip in. Oh, Tip!" And she opened the gate and went out to him on the sidewalk, a new thought having come to her. "Can't you do something to get some money and let me go to the circus with you? Can't you manage some way? Oh, Tip, do! I'll do anything for you if you only will. I never wanted anything so bad before." And Tip's face as he walked towards the village 10 minutes after that was a study. It looked so full of trouble. Kitty wanted to go to that circus, wanted to go so very much that she had coaxed and begged him in a way she had never done before. Besides, if the truth be told, Tip wanted to go himself. Every time the wind wafted back to him a swell of the distant music, it made his heart fairly jump. It was true, as Kitty had said, he always managed to slip in somehow, and the oftener he went, the oftener he wanted to go. Well, then what was the matter with Tip? What he had done so many times before, he could surely find a way to do again. Oh, yes, but Tip Lewis today was different from any Tip Lewis that had ever been before on circus day. Wasn't he trying to do right? Then what had circuses to do with that? He tried to think what were his reasons for being troubled. Why did a small voice down in his heart keep telling him that the circus was no place for him now? Looking at the matter steadily, the only reason Tip knew was that Ellis Holbrook and Howard Minturn never went. Their fathers had taught them differently. Ellis, he knew, rather looked down on people who did go, called them low. This had never troubled Tip before, because he had always known himself to be low. But now, wasn't he trying to climb? Didn't respectable people generally think that circuses were bad things? No, poor Tip, they didn't. There was Mr. Bailey, a rich man, so rich and so respectable that his son wouldn't stoop to lend Tip his spelling book at school. Yet Mr. Bailey went to the circus last year and took all his children. So did Mr. Anderson, Mr. Stone, and dozens of others, rich great men. Well, did good people go? And Tip's thoughts strayed back to Mr. Holbrook, and Mr. Parker, and Mr. Minturn, yea, and others, whose voices he had heard on the streets and in stores condemning the circus. But then, after all, where was the harm? There was Kitty. How much she wanted to go. If he could manage to take her, how glad she would be. At this point, Satan thought there was a chance for him to speak, so he walked along with Tip, talking like this. Kitty has never asked you to do anything for her before. You want to help her. You want to get her to go to Sunday school and to read the Bible. Now's your time. If you take her to the circus, very likely she'll do what you want her to do. This was a little too absurd even for Tip, who wanted to believe it all so badly. But who ever heard of taking anyone to a circus in order to get them to love Jesus? Tip knew altogether too well for his comfort that day that Mr. Holbrook's example was the safe one. At last he drew a little sigh of relief. He needn't think about it any more, for he had no money. He had never owned 50 cents at one time in his entire life. So the question, after all, would settle itself. No, it wouldn't. Mr. Dewey stood in the door of his market, looking up and down the street. "Hello, Tip," he called, as Tip turned the corner. "You're the boy I must have been looking for, I guess. If you'll carry home packages for me for an hour and not steal one of them, I'll give you 2 tickets for the circus." Tip's cheeks glowed at the word steal, and he came near telling Mr. Dewey to carry his own packages if he were afraid to trust him. But then, those 2 tickets. Here was a chance for Kitty. The conflict commenced again. A whole hour in which to decide it, for Tip meant to do the work anyway. Up and down the street, stopping at this house and that with his parcels, back again to the market for more, all the time in a whirl of thought. The question was almost decided when the 2 green tickets were placed in his hand. It closed over them eagerly. He hurried toward home. Towards home led him past the brick hotel. In the bar-room sat some of the circus men. He knew them by their heavy beards, which almost covered their faces. Knew them also because he knew every man in town, just who were strangers and who were not. Well, these circus men were very busy drinking brandy and playing cards. Tip stopped and looked in at them, and ignorant boy as he was, the thought that good respectable people would go to see and hear such men as these seemed very strange. It couldn't be right, could it? How was it? A great many nice people must have blundered terribly if it were wrong. And on the other hand, if it were not wrong, how did the minister happen to be so afraid of these things? Why did he himself have so many queer feelings about the matter? What a trouble he was in! If only he could find somebody or something that would decide it for him. Long before this, he had walked away from the hotel. Now he had crossed the bridge, gone around behind the mill, and was very near his seat under the elm. Down he sat when he came to it, still holding fast the 2 green tickets, but with the other hand diving down in his pocket for the little Bible. That was getting to be a habit with him, to hunt for this lamp of his whenever he was in darkness. He turned the leaves now with a perplexed face. If he only knew where to turn for help. "Let me see," he said. "Where was that verse that I learned for the Sunday school concert? I liked the sound of that. It was somewhere in this book full of short, queer verses. I can find it. Yes, I see it. For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken." It didn't seem to help him. He shook his head slowly, still glancing on over the verses, until suddenly his listless look vanished, and he read aloud, "Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away." "That means them," said Tip, "and me. They're wicked men, that's certain. They were drinking and gambling, and swearing too, I guess. And this verse reads about them just as plain as day. It says, Don't go near them. Says it over and over again. And I'll mind it, I will. I'll take these tickets right back to Mr. Dewey so they won't be here to put me in mind of going." No sooner said than done. He turned around and fairly galloped up the hill, round the corner, and landed nearly breathless at the market.